Okay, welcome everybody. We are getting very close to the end of the semester here. So we have someone, Dr. Chase, to introduce our presenter for today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carly Chase, and I am a horticulturist and a weed scientist in the Horticultural Sciences Department in the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. And it is my pleasure and as his advisor, to introduce Josue Saint-Fort this afternoon. Josue was born in Haiti's capital of Port-au-Prince, and he earned his bachelor's degree in agricultural engineering from the State University of Haiti in 2015 in the Faculty of Agronomy and Veterinary Medicine. After his undergrad, Josue worked as a rural engineer at the Ministry of Agriculture and Natural Resources and Rural Development in the Mitigation of Natural Disasters Program in Grand Rivière du Nord in Haiti. In 2017, he was the recipient of a very competitive scholarship funded by the USAID, which allowed him to pursue a master's degree in agricultural and biological engineering at the University of Florida, which he completed in 2019. His master's thesis was the evaluation of dry beans yield response to El Niño Southern Oscillation in Haiti with a simple model, case study, Duvier. He is currently pursuing his PhD in interdisciplinary ecology at UF's School of Natural Resources and the Environment. And Josue's research is focusing on evaluating and optimizing microsprinkler systems to enhance water use efficiency in strawberry production. His work integrates field experiments and hydrological modeling to advance strategies for reducing water use during strawberry establishment and freeze protection in Florida. His supervisory committee members are co-chair Vivek Sharma and Michael Dukes from the Agricultural and Biological Engineering departments, Shinsuke Agihara from Horticultural Sciences, and Devi Kediampakeni from the Soil, Water, and Ecosystem Sciences department. Josue, take it over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chase, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Josue Saint-Fort, and this seminar is a snapshot from my dissertation, and it's going to be about improving strawberry production sustainability with microsprinklers and modeling. Okay. So strawberries are one of the most important crop economically grown in the US. As you can see from this map, strawberries are produced all across the US. And California is the top producing region with about 90% of the production, with over 35,000 acres planted and harvested annually, with Florida coming second place with around 8%, and around 10 to 14,000 acres planted and harvested annually. In 2023, the production value, according to the USDA statistics, for all across the US was about $3.4 billion US. And for Florida, this number was around $434 million US, which makes Florida, strawberry production in Florida, one of the most lucrative crop per unit area of land grown in Florida. Now let's see how we produce strawberries in Florida. The common practice for strawberry production in Florida relies on two major things. The first thing is what you are looking at, a bare root transplant, which is widely used by the growers. And the second thing is raised beds covered with black plastic mulch with overhead irrigation with impact sprinklers for 10 to 14 days, just to maintain a cool temperature for the transplants they are using. So why we do that in Florida? It's because the strawberry season starts around September, and during this period of time, air temperature is still high. We're not recovered from the summer, so the plastic mulch can get really hot, and this is detrimental to the survival of those strawberry transplant, the bare root transplant, which have impaired root systems, when they come out of the nursery and they come in batches, in plastic batches. So when they remove them from the batches, they are not ready to go to extract water and nutrient from the soil. So they need time to acclimate. So that's why we use overhead irrigation for 10 to 14 days a week from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. So since we are pumping water from the groundwater, this operation alone can use up to 500,000 gallons per acre just to maintain the cool temperature on the black plastic mulch. And later on, when we have those freeze events in Florida, which is sometimes common in February, January, sometimes in December, so growers use overhead irrigation to protect their crop from freeze injury by applying water during the freeze event and create a fine layer of ice to protect the crop tissues from dropping below 32 degree Fahrenheit. So the consequences of overpumping are evident. So we will have a rapid drawdown of the Floridan aquifer because we pump water from there. What is that drawdown about? Is a rapid drop of the water table around the wells where the growers are using. And as a direct consequence of that is the appearance of sinkholes, which is a kind of land subsidence. Nutrient leaching is sometimes potentially having runoff depending on the soil type. So these practices are proven to be unsustainable for production. We had previous researchers focusing on ways to alleviate the problem, because when we have overpumping, it can decrease the flow of spring systems, which we have a lot in Florida, and create what we have a disconnect between groundwater and surface water, which will in turn impact the ecosystems. So the proposals were very diverse in terms of correcting or modifying the current system the growers are using, which is the impact sprinkler, by modifying the pressure or the spacing, or the use containerized transplants, crop protectant like kaolin clay. And for freeze protection, proposals were about automation or wall covers, also some modification in the settings of the irrigation systems. So these methods are either overlooked by the growers, or we have a very low adoption rate. So the Southwest Florida Water Management District wanted to explore other alternatives to the impact sprinklers that the growers are using, so they can reduce the incidence, the impact of overpumping on the ecosystems. So that's why we come with our experiment. So we evaluate micro irrigation systems for both operations, establishment and freeze protection. And also it is important to understand how those systems create infiltration or runoffs. So we use a model called IDRIS to do that. And our third objective was to assess uniformity distribution, which is really important during freeze protection, because with uniform distribution, we will have an effective freeze protection. And lastly, our last objective was to improve the current DSAT strawberry model that the researchers are developing, so we can model growth and yield for 2 cultivars that were not previously included in this model environment in DSAT. We organized all these objectives and pursue them in our chapters in our dissertation. So for the first objective, we conducted 2 parallel experiment. One that we created in a research station in Citra, which is a control experiment that we have very small plots. And the result that we obtained from the first experiment, the best performing sprinkler system that we tested, we used that on a commercial farm in Plant City to test the effectiveness of the system on a commercial farm. So the systems that we were testing, the first one is the impact sprinkler, which is very commonly used by the growers, which delivers about 3.8 gallons per minute with around 45 PSI. And for other irrigation systems, the mini revolver, the mini wobbler, the Netafim Supernet, and the Syninger XL wobbler. Those are considered as micro sprinklers or micro irrigation. The first three, the mini revolver, mini wobbler, and Netafim Supernet are considered as micro sprinklers because they have less than 1 gallon per minute in terms of delivery. And the last one, the XL wobbler, is kind of a low volume sprinklers in between the impact sprinkler and the micro sprinkler, but it is considered as a micro irrigation system. We designed an experimental trial in Citra with 4 replications. It was a complete randomized block design. We are showing here only 2 of those replications, and it's color coded. You can see it here. But what was interesting is that because the impact sprinkler has a wider range than the other one, we had to shield those sprinkler system to prevent them from spraying water to adjacent plots. And we measured water for 11 days straight with flow meters. In terms of plant materials, we use the Florida Brilliance, which is another cultivar that is commonly used in Florida. And those plots that I showed earlier they have 7 beds. So we didn't use all the 7 beds, only 3 were used for the purpose of collecting plant data, like for survival and growth. And the middle bed was used for, and at each sampling cycle, we skipped what we call a guard row. We don't collect data here to ensure that we don't have a biased experiment because of the position of certain plants comparative to the others. In terms of data collection, we collected water, as I mentioned earlier. With the flow meter, we measured the amount of gallons that we had. In the survival, vigor, and leaf greenness were measured from the 2nd to 4th week after transplanting. And leaf area, crown diameter, shoot and wood dry weight, we measured those from the 2nd to 8 weeks after transplanting. For our yield data, we collected twice a week, and we calculated our yields. For freeze protection, we use the same layout as for the establishment, and we trigger a temperature for freeze protection at 37 Fahrenheit for the first year, but we modified that to 34 Fahrenheit the second year. And to measure the effectiveness of the freeze protection on those plants, we tag 10 fruits and 10 flowers prior to the events so that we can have an idea how many fruits or flowers were affected by the freeze event. In terms of data analysis, all of the data collected were analyzed using the CLIMIX procedure in SAS, and we separated the means with Tukey with a significance level of 5%. And now for the experiment that we subsequently conducted in Plant City, as I mentioned, the best performing sprinkler, as like a spoiler, the best performing sprinkler was the mini revolver. So we compared that with what the growers had, and you can see that the rotator is very similar to the impact sprinkler with around 3.5 gallon per minute. And we compared those 2 systems side by side, and because of it's a commercial farm, we didn't have enough leeway in terms of design. So we had a block design with restriction on randomization, but for replications that are oriented east to west, I think. In terms of plant materials, the growers, they use 2 different plant materials. The first year, they used Odessa, and the second, they use Medusa. Also, the acreage was different because the one that they assigned to us was less than the one that the Corps were using, which is not a big deal because we could normalize that in our calculation. In terms of data collection, we were not allowed to conduct destructive sampling, so we use GreenSeeker, Canopio app to evaluate the growth of the plant, and those parameters like the survival, vigor, green canopy cover, and leaf greenness were assessed from the 2nd to 8th week after transplanting. And the harvesting was done by the field crew 3 times a week. And also we analyzed the data with the same procedure that we mentioned earlier. Now some results. So for the establishment, what was interesting to see, we were expecting that the impact sprinkler here used up to 300,000 gallons per acre for establishment. When we look at the other sprinkler system, they all significantly reduce that amount, with the impact sprinkler saving up to, with the mini revolver, saving up to 67% of the water used for that, and Excel Wobbler up to 47% for both years. And in terms of the survival, leaf greenness, and vigor, so we didn't see any significant differences among the treatments for both years, which is really important result to find. And in terms of water use now for freeze protection, similar results were obtained. You can see again that the impact sprinkler used up to 320-something thousand gallons per acre for freeze protection, whereas the mini revolver used around 100,000 gallons per acre for freeze protection. The saving was also high, like 62% for mini revolver. In Excel Wobbler was about 44%. Now, the question you want to ask me, what about the impact of lower volume on those plants, like plant tissues, like fruits and flowers? So we evaluate the impact in terms of deformity observed on the fruits and also the flowers that were killed. So for the first year, the incidence was very low on, the impact was very low on fruits. So, and it was not significantly different. However, for the second year, we had significant differences among the treatments, with very high impact on fruits and flowers for mini revolver and Netafim Supernet, mini revolver, and for flowers killed, it was the Excel Wobbler that had the highest, but compared to the other sprinkler system, but the mini revolver and the Excel Wobbler were the two sprinkler system that had highest impact on fruits and flowers. So why was that? We had 5 consecutive freezes events, which was unusual. And those micro sprinkler system, like the Excel Wobbler and the mini Wobbler, they had some buildup of ice on the sprinkler heads, which decreases the uniformity distribution, which is really important for freeze protection. What you're looking at are 2 examples. The first, for the first year, when we had very low impact on fruits and flowers, you can see the ice cover covering the flower is very clear, which is an indication that the freeze protection was effective. Whereas when we look at the second one, for the second year, when we started the irrigation at 34 Fahrenheit, we can see the fruits and flowers are not entirely covered, and also the ice is kind of translucent, which is an indication that the freeze protection was not enough to prevent the plant tissue from having damages. Now, what is mostly important to course is the yield. So what about the yield? So for the first year, first season, we can see in green here, the impact sprinkler here, and in the comparison to the other sprinkler system, they were not significantly different. And we only had highest yield for Netafim, but as you can see, for the second year, it was not consistent. So the second year, also, we didn't see any significant differences among the treatments, with only the Excel Wobbler showing a very low yield compared to the impact sprinkler and the other micro sprinkler system. But overall, it was about 22,000 pounds per acre for the second year for the Excel Wobbler. And you can clearly see the amount of yield that we obtained from both years from the other sprinkler systems. Now, for the experiment that we conducted on the commercial farm in Plant City. So for the establishment, I mentioned that the best performing sprinkler from experiment 1 was compared with the Gore system. And you can see clearly that, again, the rotator from Nelson used up to 200,000 gallons per acre. And the mini revolver, used around 100,000 gallons per acre. And in terms of water saving, it's about 57% of the water needed for the operation. And also in terms of vigor, NDVI was used to quantify the leaf greenness. So we didn't see any significant differences. And notice how we had 100% survival for both sprinkler systems. So which is very good thing to see for this experiment. And in terms of freeze protection, similar results were obtained, but because we have the field further south, so we only had a few freeze events. I think it was only one freeze event, but you can clearly see that, again, the Nelson rotator used up to 80,000 gallons per acre for freeze protection, while we have mini revolver around 30,000 gallons per acre. And the saving also was substantial, 63% reduction with the mini revolver. Again, the mini revolver was proven to be very effective for both establishment and freeze protection. In terms of yield, we didn't see any significant differences for both years. So again, this is a good sign that the sprinklers is a viable option. And for our second objective, so it is difficult to measure infiltration during establishment manually. And we wanted to see how those sprinkler systems perform in terms of deep percolation or runoff. So the best way we found to do that is to use the IDRIS system model to see how the water was infiltrating and if we got runoff from the sprinkler system. So the IDRIS model is a hydrological model that uses the Richard equation of flow with the modification of Van Genooten and Moellen. And what you can see from this not very complicated equation is that the theta represents the water content in the soil over time, and the K is the hydraulic conductivity, and the psi is the water potential in the soil over the depth. So we collected soil samples to establish the basis for our simulation, and the boundary we used for our simulation was the same layout that we used for previous experiment, but only 3 of those replications were used in Citra. And those core samples that we collected were collected in 2 depths of 6 and 12 inches. Those samples were collected to measure what we call the bulk density. And for the water content situation during establishment from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., we use the ECH2O soil moisture sensor here at two depth, again, 6 and 12 inches. And those are the data loggers for data extraction. And we needed to calibrate the model to fully represent the situation in the soil. So these are the parameters that we calibrated. And the soil moisture data was used also in the calibration process as the initial condition from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So we can have a very good representation, a very good fit of the model. So what you are looking at is the result of the simulation for the water content. So the reason why we use the water content is to use it as a proxy in order to establish how much infiltration we had or runoff that we had. So if we had a very good performance with the prediction of soil moisture content with the model, we can have a certain level of confidence in the estimation of infiltration and runoff. So here is the impact sprinkler. The IS is kind of scrambled here. The impact sprinkler, the model was not able to fully represent the water content in the soil because the water was huge amount of water was pumped in the walls from the furrows. So the model couldn't catch that really quickly. So the model performance that we used to see whether this was effective were the Wood mean square error, the Nash-Sutcliffe efficiency, and the Klein-Gupta efficiency. For the impact sprinkler, those were in the lower end. And for RMSE, just to clarify that, when we have a high RMSE, it's the model performance is low. And for the other, like the NSE and KGE, when we have high value for that, the performance of the model is high. So for the impact sprinkler, the performance was in the lower end for the NSE and the higher end for the RMSE. But for the other sprinkler systems like the Netafim, the Excel Wobbler, the Mini Revolver, and also the Netafim, the model was had a very high performance with about 90% for NSE and 94% for KGE, which is again a good sign that the model can mimic how the water is infiltrating. And for the impact sprinkler, it is clearly shown that those layers were saturated really quickly during the establishment. Whereas for the other sprinkler system, it was very slow because of the very low delivery rate of those sprinklers. Now, what is the most important aspect that we wanted to consider was the total infiltration of the water. So when you see the depth, it's not like it can be estimated in terms of volume. So for the control system, which is the impact sprinkler, you can see it's significantly higher compared to the other sprinkler system, with the Mini Revolver showing the lowest value for infiltration. And in terms of runoff, we didn't see any runoff during the establishment period using the model simulation, which is again expected because the soil was Kindler fine sand, so it is high hydraulic conductivity, so it is not expected to see runoff in those soil unless we have very high compaction in the furrows. Now, our third chapter, we focus on the uniformity of those sprinkler systems. As I mentioned earlier, uniformity distribution is really important for freeze protection. So if, according to literature, 80% uniformity distribution is essential for effective fruit protection. So we wanted to see how those sprinkler system would perform when we have wind conditions like higher than 7 miles per hour or lower than 7 miles per hour. But it is also proven that the impact sprinkler, the one that the growers are currently using, there are evidence to confirm they can perform well in wind that are around 7 miles per hour. So we wanted to confirm whether those other sprinkler system we're going to propose can perform better or as much as the impact sprinkler. So we designed an experiment in Citra, and what you can see from this picture are what we call catch cans. So we lay those catch cans on the top of the beds, and we start the irrigation system for 1 hour. And we monitor the wind speed along the way, so we can see how the wind is varying. And we collected the water from those catch cans, so we can calculate what we call the lower quarter uniformity distribution. We only used 3 replications from our previous experiment for this purpose. And we had about 21 catch cans, and we performed 20 tests, 8 for during the first year and 12 during the second year. And it is also important to mention that those tests were performed around May, right after we are done with the experiment. So we uprooted all those strawberry plants. Now, some results from the distribution, lower quarter distribution uniformity. So you can see from the green color that the mean of the sprinkler system of the mini revolver here is not significantly different from the impact sprinkler here. So it was about 75%, 72% distribution uniformity under 7 miles per hour in the morning. But for the evening experiment, we had wind speed that surpassed 7 miles per hour. So there was a decrease in terms of performance for the mini revolver, the one that we proposed to use. But for the morning experiment, it was performing very well. So the grain of salt for that is that growers must be aware that if they are using a mini revolver, they have to take account of wind. If they have a lot of wind, they must use other alternative protection in order to reduce the impact on those crops. Now, for our 4th objective, so we wanted to contribute to the development of the DSAT strawberry crop growth. We had previously started with this model in 2016, but it was mainly about economics of strawberry production. They included some cultivars like Brilliance, but they didn't have anything for Odessa and Medusa. Why I'm saying Odessa and Medusa? It's because there's a growing trend in South Florida, around the Plant City region. Those cultivars are from the Driscolls, and growers are partnering with Driscolls to use those cultivars. So we thought it was important to test the robustness of the model with those 2 sprinkler system, with the 2 cultivars, sorry. So the DSAT is a model called the Decision Support System for Agrotechnology Transfer. And in the template of DSAT, we have several models, and the crop grow is one of them. Previously calibrated cultivars like the Radiance and Brilliance, as I mentioned, they showed the model was performed very well with around 7 and 99 of this statistic, which is performance index. And for our cultivars, for our experiment, we wanted to use data from the region that we conducted our experiment in Plant City, like precipitation, temperature, evapotranspiration, observed yield, to simulate for Odessa and Medusa and see how well the model would perform. So we divided the data that we collected for yield into two parts because we didn't have 2 years of data for each of those cultivars. So one was used for calibration, the other was used for validation. And Florida Brilliance and Radiance were considered as our reference cultivars. So in terms of their cultivar parameters, genetic parameters, we modified those to accommodate the new cultivars. In terms of performance of the model, so as I mentioned, we used a relative root mean square error, which is the ratio of the root mean square error over the overall mean. So the model performed really well for Medusa. As you can see, the gray dots are observed data, and the blue is the simulation of Medusa, and the red is the simulation of Radiance. So just for short, I just picked some of those most important results. And the D-stat was about 96.96, and the RMSE is 0.18. So a very low RMSE, again, is very important to show the model performance. Whereas for the second cultivar, the Odessa, we started very good for the first 100 days, but about 125 days, there's like a very stagnation, a phase stagnation of the yield because we had some issues with diseases in the field. So the model couldn't predict that. So you can see the model keep increasing the yield over the time. This is for the cumulative yield, but what was mostly interesting to us was to see the week-to-week production. So for the Medusa, the week-to-week production, the model performed average in terms of prediction of the yield, like 0.61. But for the Odessa, you can see the red color here. The dip here is what we were discussing for the cumulative around 125 days. There's a really huge drop in the yield. So in summary, we've seen that all the micro sprinklers that we tested significantly reduce water during freeze protection or establishment on both the control experiment that we had on station and also the on-farm study, with no significant impact on yield and growth of those plants. And the mini revolver was the one that was showing the most promise for like an alternative to the impact sprinkler, with about 67% of saving for establishment and up to 62% for freeze protection. And the distribution uniformity was relatively good during low wind speed, like less than 7 miles per hour, but can be tricky when we have more, like higher than 7 miles per hour. And the mini revolver obviously didn't produce any runoff, and this significantly reduced infiltration. And lastly, for this improvement, the model after calibration performed well for cumulative yield, but it was not very well for periodic yield estimation. So we have more work to do collecting more data so we can improve the accuracy of the model simulation. So in conclusion, technically, the mini revolver is kind of an alternative to the impact sprinkler. Cores are already showing interest for this sprinkler system. They want to use it. And the DSAT can be used as a decision tool, making tool, but we are not there yet for new cultivars. So we need more data for that to increase the prediction for cumulative for periodic yield. And in terms of recommendation, as we've seen for the mini revolver, they have a tendency to have buildup of ice on the sprinkler head. But since we were conducting our experiment up north, so if someone is around Citra, so you have to start your irrigation like 37 Fahrenheit. But if you're further down south, I know that growers use about 30 degree Fahrenheit to start their irrigation for freeze protection. And in terms of impact of the model of the research, overall research, so we have a significant reduction of the water footprint for strawberry production in Florida, which is huge because we know how important the ecosystems in Florida are, and we need to preserve those ecosystems, which will increase sustainability of strawberry production in the long run. And for runoff and infiltration, we have a significant reduction of those with micro sprinkler systems. So again, this is an important thing to consider when we are choosing which sprinkler system to use for establishment and freeze protection. And last, we can have a better control of strawberry production seasonality for better management if we have more data. But thus far, we have very limited data for. This is something that we can work on that, or other researchers can work on that. So I want to thank everybody who helped me with this research, the grant, the funding agency, the crew at the farm, and my lab from the Dr. Chase lab, my team members from the Dr. Chase lab, and the assistantship from SNRE. And now it's time for you guys to ask me questions. So I'm ready.
Thank you. There are actually a couple of questions already in the chat. One was from pretty early in your presentation and one just recent one.
Mm-hmm. Check. Where is the question? Okay. So could we match this technique with greenhouse facility with semi-translucent solar panel roof, focusing on aerial techniques to reduce surface use? Okay, I don't know if everybody heard that question, but there's a question about could we match this technique with greenhouse facility with semi-translucent solar panel roofs, focusing on aerial techniques to reduce surface use? Well, this experiment was for field-grown strawberries, so we didn't have this aspect in our study. Maybe someone else can consider doing that. Next question, do the farmers have to pay for water volume? Actually, there is a limit in terms of the Southwest Florida Water Management District is trying to limit the amount of water growers are using for agriculture in general. And there's a threshold. I think there's sometimes if you want to establish a new farm, you have to get a permit. And depending on which crop you are using, if you are going to use a crop like strawberries and you are using the impact sprinkler, it's going to be very demanding on groundwater. So they can limit the amount of water. They can set up a threshold about the amount of water you can use. I've heard that they have to pay if they surpass the threshold, but I need to verify that. So I don't have the exact answer for that. Next question from the chat. Okay, I think that was from the chat. I don't know if anyone from the audience has some questions about. Let's see. Okay, no more questions from the chat.
Other questions? Is there a price difference between the two different sprinklers, the IS and
Yeah, there's a price difference. A very good question. The question is there a price difference between the impact sprinkler and the mini revolver? Yes, there is one. The impact sprinkler, they don't need a lot of sprinkler head. They only need a 40 by 40, so they need 4 sprinkler systems in the area of 40 by 40 feet. But for the mini revolver, I can try to, oops, if I could, oh, okay. If I could show you the distribution. So for the mini revolver, we need more sprinkler head. Yeah, so the mini revolver is the yellow color. So you can see you need approximately 6. Okay. Yeah, you need 6 of those head in comparison to 4 for this. And most of the goers, they already have their system, the impact sprinkler, and it's very hard for them to change. But they can put an additional row, an additional line.
You wanna go to the Citra, to the Plant City site?
Yeah,
Sure.
so for here, like here, so you can see that for the goer side, they use, even though it's not the impact sprinkler, but it's very similar. You can see they use like around 2, 4, 6, like 12 heads, and for our side was 36 approximately. So we need those amount of sprinkler heads mainly for distribution uniformity. For the impact sprinkler, it's very easy to get that, but for the mini revolver, they have a very small range, so they can't reach every corner. So you have to include more of these. So we have more laterals compared to the goer side. So that will have additional costs. But with about from a discussion that I had with one of the people from the district, so they were willing to cost share. I don't know if that's still a case. But yeah, if the goers would like to do that, they can get some additional fund to adapt their system. Any more questions?
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, very impactful research, it seems. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Thank you all. So, this one, yeah.